We're gonna cut right to the chase today, guys. Don't want to waste any time because this might be a longer format video. We are doing a tier ranking of every book I read this year. So pretty self-explanatory. We're gonna look at this book and we're gonna rate it. So first we have Into the Wild. Um, this is the only like non-fiction biography type of book that I read this year. Well, actually, I guess I read another more like informative text as well for one of my college classes, but one of the only two. Into the Wild, uh, huge criticism with the author being sort of biased towards the individual he's talking about, because there's sort of a personal connection there between the writer and the story of Chris McCandless. And I don't really think that influence really bothered me personally, though. I think it was just interesting to sort of hear the story and maybe what motivated, what was all going behind, what led to the Odyssey to Alaska for Chris McCandless and his ultimate demise. So yes, there was maybe some parts a little glorified, but I don't think that was a huge distractor for me as it might have been for other people. I was super invested in the story, and it's as a primarily fiction reader, I think that's a testament to how good and the writing was and how invested I was and the way he formatted the story. It's very not like a linear timeline because you figure out they die. It's like the first chapter. Spoiler alert. Sorry. Overall, I'd give it a B, solid B. I wasn't like super. I give it an A. I was thinking about this book for a while after I read it, but it isn't like the best thing I've read ever. So we'll give it an S tier. All right, next up we have Golden Sun. We're going to start with the Red Rising since Golden Sun's the second book in the series. Red Rising, I would give an A as well. I'd probably put it above Into the Wild. Red Rising is just a fun story. It's not necessarily like literary or anything, but it's just fun sci-fi. It's like, you turn on a Star Wars movie and, you know, we're not there for I don't know where I'm going with this. Red Rising is just a fun story, and it's not anything like too revolutionary. The first book is sort of like Hunger Games in space. That's how people like to put it. Um, it's honestly just fun. I don't think Darrow is a Gary Stew, as some would claim. Especially in this next coming book, he definitely makes mistakes. So we'll give it A. Golden Sun, I ended up liking a little bit more than Red Rising, so I'll put it above it if I can get this to work. Golden Sun does one of the most important things any second book in a series has to do, or in a trilogy, and that's to expand the world. And that's what it did. So the first book, we're sort of like, all right, here's the game. Let's try to win the game. Now we're like the whole Milky Way galaxy is up for grabs now, especially near the end. So Darrow's doing big things. We get introduced to more characters, and the characters that we did have become more developed. It's just a super fun story, honestly. I'd give it S tier if maybe it was more literary, possibly. I think that's the only thing holding back like Red Rising and Golden Sun is it's fun and punchy, but it's not necessarily like a Dune, I guess you could say. But they're super fun books, so I tear through all of them. So next we have Nova Terra, Secret of Galiza. This was a book that Garland Red Vine on Instagram got in contact with me to read their book. And part of the reason I'm going to be putting this in C tier, first off, you have to understand these self-published books that I read are going against like pretty big time authors. I mean, like Jeff Vandermeer, Pierce Brown. So it's not that this was like a bad book. It's just in comparison to these like marquee, stellar, on the Books a Million bookshelves books. It's not going to stand up. Um, this book in particular, I think if it was marketed towards like a younger audience, I think it would do really well. I could see like a younger version of myself, and I mentioned that in my review of the book. Maybe I'll add a tag to all the reviews, and it's probably not. I'm too lazy to do that, but that's a besides the fact. The good book, like I said, younger audience I think would really like tear this up. Me as really as a more mature audience, I liked it. I liked the whimsy of it, but um, the storytelling was pretty like video game like, I guess. Uh, but it's not like a lit RPG. I think is what they call those now. But yeah, C tier. I'd say if I was like in middle school and I read this book, it'd be like ARS. Next up is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This one was recommended to me by two people that I know, and one happens to be my girlfriend, the other one happens to be her sister. And this was also a good book. I would probably put it A tier. I'd probably throw it above Into the Wild. It's a short book. I got through it pretty quick. Um, Pretty bleak. The prose is really good. Um, I wasn't too like enthralled by this book as I was like maybe the Red Rising series because these books I was definitely thinking about after, and I wanted to jump into the next one pretty quickly. I mean, I have never known men isn't a series; it's just one singular book, but has a lot of good merit, and that's about all I remember about it because I have a very small brain. Okay, next we have True Quest by Grant Andreson. I hope I'm saying that correct. I apologize if I'm not. If you happen to be watching this. This one I'm also going to throw down here with Secret of Galiza Novatera. True Quest was very much like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign type of story, so if that's your thing, then you'll probably like this a lot. Um, I did find a couple grammatical errors strung throughout the story, but when you're self-publishing a book that's and the editing falls on your behalf, it's easy to let little things like that slide through the editing process. Um, I guess the biggest thing for me in this book is we sort of get the story of these characters. We're building like, okay, here's these characters, here's what they're doing, and then we sort of it's kind of jarring because there's a abrupt backstory in the middle of the book, which takes up like the second act almost, and then we get back to these characters for the third final act. I guess that kind of drew me out of it. Was okay, now I have to start this next story about these characters. It's sort of like a mini like prequel novella, and then I'm going back to the future and the present, and then we're finishing the story. But and of course, like compared, like I said, mentioned earlier, to like premier published authors, I mean, it's hard to stack up with the best, especially when you're first starting off. Next, we have The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I wrote my capstone for the English side of my degree on this book, and it's a Hemingway. I'll give it an A. I'd probably put it below I Who Have Never Known Men, but above Into the Wild. Um, a lot of themes here of like masculinity, the sort of lost generation has always been pretty fascinating to me, and that's like that's the demographic this book is sort of centered around because all these characters are part of the lost generation, the people coming back from the first Great World War, the Great World War. I don't know why I had great on there, but and yeah, I mean Hemingway, the the indirect characterization, I think is the word I'm looking for. He's one of the best at that. I really am not a fan of his writing style, but I guess I understand the beauty of it, if you want to call it that. But like a McCarthy sort of, except for Hemingway abides by all the grammatical rules, like almost to a T, where Cormac McCarthy does the opposite. So maybe that was a terrible comparison. But good book. I could see a lot of people rating this lower because a lot of it is fishing and just people being alcoholics, but Sun Also Rises. I just think Hemingway's great with character, in my personal opinion, and I love a good character story. So next we have Stormfront by Jim Butcher, and I'm almost gonna put this in D. No, I'll put it top of C tier. I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first Dresden Files book. It felt very like YA to me, very young adult. I read this. I actually found this book on one of my cooperating teachers' classrooms, and so that was the teacher that I worked with while I started teaching in the classroom for my education program in college. But I don't know. Wasn't the biggest fan of Stormfront. It's sort of a detective novel. There's a lot of good things going for it. I like the sort of urban setting for a fantasy story is cool. The world building is pretty good. I really enjoy how he sort of wasn't beating you over the head with the world building. At times he does get a little info dumpy, but I don't know. I'm trying to remember why I didn't like this book, but I didn't. I hate Harry Dresden. Maybe that's why. Okay. Next book, we have Ghost Boys. This was another book I found in the same classroom of my same cooperating teacher. Ghost Boys, I'm going to give a B. Um, so this is a really interesting story. Tells the story of a boy who gets shot by a cop wrongfully, and we sort of get to learn about previous kids who were in the same situation, previous like African American children, and so we get the Ghost Boy element of it. And I enjoy the story. Real, I think it would be a great story to teach in a classroom, of course, because there's a solid theme there that's pretty obvious to pick up on. So it insists upon itself, if you want to put it that way. But again, it felt pretty YA, um, almost at time. Yeah, I would say the writing's pretty simplistic, but it is a good story. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely see myself teaching it in the classroom in the future. Um, Next, we have Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. Is this going to be the first S tier? Now, here's the thing. What's this series called? Do I like The Expanse more than the Red Rising series? That's a good question. As you may tell already, I really like the Leviathan Wakes. It's sort of like a not so distant future sci-fi story, which I thought was really cool. There's a lot of as the authors, because it's two people writing on their name, put it's like the working man's hard sci-fi. So there's a lot of like cool concepts in there that it really gets you into the story because you're not breaking any like crazy scientific rules, like maybe like a Red Rising or Golden Sun, where people get shot out of spaceships. Um, Not to say that's also not cool. They're just we have two different goals here with these stories. But Leviathan Wakes, I'm gonna put it. I'll put it above Red Rising, but below Golden Sun. I really did end up enjoying Leviathan Wakes. Good characters, good world building, good setting. I'm not the ending with the girl, and then he finds her, and then they sort of throw it off. It all happens really fast. It's a pretty slow paced book, and then the last back half just flies through. Um, I give it an A. Probably shouldn't linger on any of these books too long, so this video isn't an hour long. Next, we have Authority by Jeff Vandermeer. This is the second book in the Southern Reach series, Southern Reach trilogy. I think there's more books in the world of the Southern Reach, but so this one directly follows what happens in Annihilation, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that book. That's a really good book. Authority, I liked a good amount as well. Um, I love the Southern Reach series. Control is one of my favorite characters, and just the way that Vandermeer writes about aliens or like alien species is just I really love it. I think he does a really great job of portraying the unknown factor about it and how like these aliens coming to us could be just have a whole different frame of existence than we do, and so their perspective on what is life would be completely different to ours. So that bridge of communication would almost be impossible. This book does slow down in some points, though. So I end up really liking it, though. I'd probably give it above Leviathan Wakes, below Golden Sun. All right, next we have Feed by M.T. Anderson. This book is a dystopian young adult novel, and it's really good. The themes of sort of super capitalism, what maybe like end stage capitalism will look like, and how scary and dystopian that might be is. The kids definitely act like kids. They're all, especially the main guy, just Titus, I think was his name, annoys me so much, but doesn't mean he's a bad character. I really ended up liking this book. The messaging was awesome. pretty quick to go through. Good world building as well. I would probably put Feed here. No, I'll put it here. So between no, yeah, between Leviathan Wakes and Red Rising. So next we have Dune Messiah, which is the sequel to Dune. So let me do Dune first, real quick. So here's Dune. Pretty cool cover I found online. Okay, Dune's S tier. Not much else needs to be said. Okay, so Dune Messiah. I really liked Dune Messiah. It definitely falls heavier on the space politics in the second book than the first book, which is can be kind of crazy because there's a lot of space politics in the first book. How the prescience works with Paul is touched on a lot in this book, which is also super interesting to see how there is gaps in his like foresight. It's a shorter book. It's a Dune book. I got to give it A. I don't know if it's S tier. I wouldn't say it's as good as Dune, but we'll put it below Authority. I mean, yeah, yeah, we'll go there. Dune Messiah. Yeah. We read a lot of good books this year. Acceptance. Acceptance, I found myself enjoying probably about as much or a little bit more than Authority. Again, has all the strengths that I mentioned with Authority. Um, how Vandermeer writes about aliens. Also, Vandermeer's writing style is just very. I really enjoy how he his just the way his prose is like structured. It's great. I'm borderline S tier. I'd probably put it A though. Probably put it. We'll save S tier for the Dunes, but yeah. Except I love the Southern Reach series, but I know that could be a hot take. Some other people have differing opinions on that. Next, we have Flowers for Algernon. So this was another great book. I'm sure some people have probably read this in school for class. This is where I found this book. This was another one that I read because of this first cooperating teacher that I was working with and the books that they were teaching. Thoughts for Algernon, story about a man who, has autism on some form of on that spectrum. And he gets a surgery, which makes him 3 times smarter. And then we get to see what happens when he eventually loses it. Sorry. That was probably a huge spoiler, guys. I'm sorry. But yeah, he gets the surgery done and eventually he reverts back to his normal state. So it's really good book. I mean, I almost cried at the end. Um it's sort of yikesy sometimes though how it addresses people with autism. Like it's like a bad thing that you need to get rid of, which is a little bit not cool. But the character again, good character work. It's a great study of the pursuit of knowledge and what is life, in correlation to the knowledge that you have of what's going on. Because one big thing we learned is the smarter that he gets is almost the sadder that he gets. So maybe with great intelligence, because you know comes great sadness. I mean, who knows a smart guy that's sad? I mean, I do. I think some. I'm sure I know one smart guy that's sad. Okay. Anyways, this is another A tier. I liked it more than the here. We'll put it there. A lot in A tier. I feel like I'm being biased. Okay. Next we have Outside the Gates by Molly Gloss. This was a book that I read. I was actually recommended by another cooperating teacher that I had the pleasure with working with. This is another great book for a classroom. We sort of get the whole of a strong theme of if you're different, how should you be treated? Because in this world, the different people are sort of exiled from the community, and there's magic. It's sort of like fairy tale esque how the story's told and how it feels, but it is very YA. I think it has the same problem for me as Ghost Boys does. It's like the writing's very simplistic. Not that simplistic writing's bad per se. This is all my personal taste. but very YA like Ghost Boys. Both of them have great themes. Both of them would be great to teach in a classroom, but they might not be my personal favorites. So I'm going to leave them in B tier. And I think I did like Ghost Boys a little bit more than Outside the Gates. So we'll leave it like that. Next, we have The Shining by Stephen King. So this is an obvious S tier. I put it below Dune because I like Dune more. But The Shining by Stephen King, I watched the movie at my local theater after finishing the book. They were doing like a flashback cinema showing of it, and the movie's terrible. I'm sorry for the movie buffs out there. I'm not personally a movie guy, so maybe I'm failing to understand maybe all the like intricacies that went into filming it and certain shots and the coloring and the lighting of the movie. But those sort of fail to dawn upon me because I'm seeing it from a storytelling aspect. And I just, people say if you take the movie as its own story away from the book, then it's pretty enjoyable. I found myself struggling to do that, and the book was just so much better than the movie. But yeah, books S tier. Sorry, little rant there. Okay. Next, we have The Call of the Wild. This is a classic by Jack London. Um, you might really like this book if you're a socialist. No, I'm only kidding. But yeah, The Call of the Wild, I understand why it's a classic. Um, it also insists upon itself. We get the theme. The perfect socialist analogy here is the dogs that carry the sled. They're all working as a team equally to sort of achieve the same goal. I saw that in a Goodreads review. I didn't come up with that because I mean, obviously I didn't, but yeah, simple book, short. I'd probably put it in the B range. I went through it pretty quick. It sort of has one goal. It's like, okay, here's the goal of the story. Man has to go back to his instinctual roots to get the full capacity of his existence. Um, so yeah, I'd probably put it somewhere in here. A big inspiration for me wanting to read this book was I read Into the Wild first, and there was a mention of Chris McCandless reading The Call of the Wild, and it's like one of the books that they found, like I think in his cabin, or not the cabin, but the bus that he was living in, or maybe it was just a book that he had highlighted that they found. He highlighted like passages from, and it was neat to see how that sort of aligned with what his ideals were, Chris McCandless, and how that like sort of makes sense in the context of the journey that he would go on. As a book itself, though, I give it a B. I enjoyed it, but wasn't anything too crazy. I get why it's a classic, I suppose. Next, we have What Does It All Mean? A very short introduction to philosophy. I forget the author, Thomas Nagel, something like that. So I read this for my online philosophy course, which I received a pretty poor grade in, if that tells you anything. The goal of this book isn't to sort of like it is like it says, it's a short introduction to philosophy. So it gives you like the major questions of philosophy. It doesn't talk about any other philosophers in the book. And the author makes a point of that, where he's not going to give you what other people think. He sort of just wants to dig into what you think. So we have like the question of like free will versus determinism. He sort of like shows that question. Uh, what is justice? Sort of the basic fundamental blocks of philosophy, and he lets you chew on them. So like another one was like death. If there's an afterlife, or if you're just darkness the rest of your life. Um, this was like the third or fourth philosophy course I've taken in the course of my life, and so I was sort of I was automatically thinking of philosophers every time I was reading these like sort of debates. I was like, okay, well this guy says this, but I remember this guy saying this. So I think if this was the first philosophy, if this was my first experience with philosophy, my first introduction to philosophy, I would have ranked this book higher. It serves a purpose, but just personally, how much I enjoyed it, I'd probably throw it in the C tier. I would probably put it top of C tier. So next we have Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This was the very first book I did a review on this channel. I think I started this channel at the beginning of this year, so that makes sense. Mistborn. I. Oh, sorry. I really liked Mistborn. I still need to read Well of Ascension. I read the first two chapters and then I started reading something else because that's what I usually do when I'm reading a series. I don't think it's S tier. I definitely give Mistborn an A tier. The magic system is definitely one of the more unique ones I've read. Um, the characters are nice. There's a pretty wide cast, and all of them have even this more cider characters have like at least a little bit of personality. So no one's just wrote off. Vin's a great character. Kelsier is a great character. Um, didn't jump into the second one after reading this. Couldn't tell you why. Is Mistborn a better first book than Red Rising? The twist at the end of Mistborn is also pretty nice. Okay, I need to do some adjusting real quick. Let's move this down here. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, Mistborn just above Red Rising. Um, Great book. It's Brandon Sanderson, so you sort of know what you're getting into there. I'm sure there's a ton of videos on YouTube talking about that guy. So just keep it brief. Next, we have Lord of Chaos. So we're on the little Wheel of Time string here. I read 3 Wheel of Time books this year, so maybe I'll finish this series and by like 2026. This is a very hot take, but I was sort of lukewarm on Lord of Chaos, and it's been since the summer since I read it, so maybe a reread would help you formulate my opinions. I just found myself struggling a lot in the middle of this book. It felt kind of sloggish to me, even more than like Crown of Swords and Path of Daggers did. Of course, the ending of this book is amazing, and a lot of huge things happen. I'm trying to think, of course, with Rand, but uh, Matt and Elaine, Queen, Ovid, Nynaeve, them as well. Uh, but of course, it's Wheel of Time, so I'm gonna give it A because I'm biased. But I'd probably give it Lord of Chaos. I'll give it Low Red Rising. Is that crazy? Am I gonna get torched for rating Red Rising higher than Lord of Chaos? Yeah, I should probably bump it up. I'm actually terrified. Um, was it better than Mistborn though? I'm gonna put Lord of Chaos there. Um, the ending I think really carries that book for me. Um, so next we have Crown of Swords. Crown of Swords. I came into this book with low expectations because I was aware that this is where the slog starts. It didn't start for me though. There were some parts of this book that were a little bit slow, but I ended up actually enjoying it pretty well. The ending with Samuel versus Rand, that was cool. How Samuel ended up dying. I've heard that's going to be important later, especially a character that sort of saves Rand in that fight was also pretty interesting. I'm trying to think of other things that happen in this book. I kind of only remember the endings of this book, and they all sort of run into this like each other for me, if that makes sense. Like I can remember key events that have happened in the series, but I don't know if I could tell you which book it was in, except for like Dumais, Wells, and Lord of Chaos. But yeah, this book sort of starts off with like Rand addressing the aftermath of Dumais well, and him remembering the names of all the people that died because of him. And then we have the whole Matt and Nynaeve looking for the Bowl of Wind, which was cool. Yeah, I'd probably, no, I can't put that above Lord of Chaos, can I? I can't. What if someone actually watched this video as a Wheel of Time fan? They'll never watch my videos again. Okay, and then finally we have the Path of Daggers, which I did like more than the Crown of Swords, so I'll throw it in right there. Path of Daggers was great. Great moments. We have Rand with Kalendor and the Shanshin. That was a great moment. They finally get the bowl to work. That was pretty cool. Elaine is fighting for the Lion Throne, or she's at least starting to. Perrin has his own thing going on. There's no Matt, which is sad. But I don't know. These two are pretty close between Daggers and Crown of Swords. I think I only like Path of Daggers like a little bit more. But yeah, that should be the completed list for 2024 this year, guys. Come back next year for the 2025 one. But But yeah, if you agree or disagree with any of my takes, be sure to put that in the comments and let me know why. Some of these books that I've read, I forget a lot that happens in them, so I feel bad reviewing them. And there could be elements that I enjoyed, maybe that I forgot, I guess. But yeah, here's the tier for this year, guys. Dune and The Shining round out the top of S tier. Dune being my probably my favorite book that I read this year. It's a sci-fi classic, of course, but yeah. So thank you guys for watching. I'm gonna aim to upload a video next weekend, so we'll see how that goes. I might start some video game content as well, especially since Steam is having a sale right now. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and for Christmas, please subscribe to me, and we'll see you guys in the next video.